Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. It's kind of fun for me to be up here on the stage because normally as a journalist I'm down there writing the notes, so I get to see how the other half lives. I wanted to talk a little bit today about what it's like to be an energy journalist. As Michael said, one of the things I've been working on, not just my day job, but at night and other times, is the book, The Great Texas Wind Rush. It's got a very long subtitle, but Michael has very prominently featured the story about the glider he just told is actually the opening to our book. He built the first wind farm in Texas, 1981, 5 spindly turbines on the plains of Pampa, and he's just got amazing stories. So yeah, that's coming out in June from University of Texas Press. Asher Price, who's an Austin American Statesman reporter, and I have collaborated on that. So I'm not going to be a very technical speaker. I'm not going to talk about demand response, smart grid solutions, solar thermal, all the other fun stuff you guys are talking about here. But instead, I'm just going to talk about being an energy reporter. Michael asked me to talk about kind of how you all can communicate your message better. I'm actually going to flip that around a little bit because I'm an objective journalist and my only message is facts. And so I'll just talk about how I decide on the stories to write about, because there's certainly no shortage of options in Texas. Just a brief word about the Texas Tribune, where I work. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. We cover politics and policy in the state of Texas. Online publication. We've got maybe 15 or so reporters. Little known fact about the Tribune is that we have a really terrible softball team called the Runoffs. And a better known fact is if we score a run, it's like a miracle. Can't beat Texas Monthly. Better known fact is that we have a partnership with the New York Times so that twice a week some of our stories run in special Texas pages of the Times. And I like this slide, this URL, because it's newyorktimes.com national U.S. states, territories, and possessions /Texas. So what is being an energy reporter all about? It's basically, one thing to know is it's a very public-facing job. I talk to some of you. I talk to readers. I get emails and calls. You know, Kate, should restaurants really be serving water, tap water, without asking customers, given that we're in a drought? You know, Kate, I really hate smart meters. You know, I hate/love fracking. Can you map this came last week, can you map the locations of reservoirs in Texas against the locations of power plants? Yeah, I'd love to if I had time. And also I get some reader feedback like this. I actually got this email when I worked at the New York Times 3 years ago. Like, yeah. It was pretty funny. I showed this around the newsroom. Everyone just about fell down laughing, and somebody suggested I write back, "Dear Darcy, I think the columnist Frank Rich could use a makeover too," but I never quite got around to that. Moving on, energy environment. What do I cover? I cover a lot of water. I cover a lot of fracking, some wind, some smart grid, certainly ERCOT and its various troubles have been a big feature. And you all may not realize it, but Texas is just a wonderful state to cover. I mean, for one thing, you have everything. You have wind, oil, gas, coal, biomass, a lot of sun, if not yet a lot of solar power, and some pollution and drought too. So a lot of very interesting topics. Great people to talk to from a journalist perspective. I'd always rather talk to a Texas rancher than a person in a suit who comes to visit me in a New York office. I mean, it's just much more fun. And you have people like Jerry Patterson, the land commissioner, who we were talking about wind power, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, and talking about the turbines that he's been pushing for in the Gulf of Mexico, which is, of course, a major bird route. And I said, well, what about these migratory birds? And he says, well, you know, sure, having turbines in the Gulf will pop a few birds, but at the end of the day, we'll have smarter birds. And, you know, I mean, that's just great copy. So at the Texas Tribune, I take our nonprofit mission very seriously, and to me, one of the things that means is that I aim to do stories that are original. That's why I'm not necessarily leaping at the chance to cover your press release. If the Dallas Morning News has the zebra mussel infestation in North Texas adequately covered, I mean, that's great. I will leave that story to them. If the San Antonio Express News has good coverage of the Eagleford Shale, again, that can be very much left to them. It's one of the reasons I am not right now writing lots of articles about the tar sands protests about the Keystone Pipeline in East Texas. I wrote about tar sands a couple years ago when the Keystone a couple years ago when no one else was writing about it in Texas, and now it's, you know, Houston Chronicle, New York Times, everybody is all over it, and so I try to do things that will, you know, kind of add value, add to the public knowledge. So how do I decide on stories? That's actually, for me, this is the most fun part of being a journalist. I have a giant disorganized list on my computer of stories that I would like to write. Many of them, unfortunately, I'll never get to, but the criteria, as I said, number one criteria is it original? You know, this story, I'm not going to do a story on, whoa, Austin's going green. I mean, that story's been done many, many times in the last 5 or 10 years, and it's certainly very important, but it's not particularly new. But I was talking with some folks, I don't know, a couple of months ago, who said that there's a growing oil and gas presence in Austin, and so I fleshed that out and turned it into a story. And I've also conversely done a story on Houston, oil and gas capital, going green, and when Waco goes green, I will be there too. So another criteria for writing a story is why now, what's important, what's happening in the future. Is this story interesting to me because I'm the one that has to write it and spend time with it? Who cares? You know, what is the regional appeal of this story? What will engage readers? That's a particular challenge for something like energy efficiency. It's kind of hard to, it's a very important topic, but hard to visualize a negative, and saving something, essentially. Similarly for combined heat and power, I mean, just kind of getting that word into the public, or that trio of words into a story is, you know, an interesting process. Does it have a good photo to go along with it? This story was, we went out to Texas Panhandle, this town called Claude, about a year ago to do a story about windmillers, people who fix the old water windmills that help settle the West. And essentially, this was just an amazing story. You know, this guy up there fixing the windmill against the open sky. This photo ran big in our New York Times partnership and really just made the page. So having a photo is very important. I don't write a lot of stories about specific technologies. I get a lot of people in the renewable energy and other industries emailing me, you know, Kate, I have the solar panel that's going to save the world. You know, I have the best form of algae, you know, fracking in water. I've totally got that solved with this new gel, and that's really great. I'm glad that this is all being solved, but it's not something I have any expertise in. I can't tell which technology is, or early stage technology is going to work and which isn't, so I honestly just leave that to the experts. We're focused on politics and policy at the Tribune in any case. So how do I find stories? I guess the number one way really is just talking to people. Some of it's sources in the areas that I cover. It's also can be just kind of random people. I was talking with a friend of a friend who said that her brother was a rock climber and he fixed wind turbines for a living. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And so I wrote that down on my list. This was like 4 years ago, and it sat on the list for about a year until I had time to write it. And this, it was an amazing story. A company called Rope Partner out of California does hire rock climbers. Some solar companies, it turns out, also hire rock climbers because they have expertise on going up on roofs and things like that. And anyhow, this story made it to the #2 most emailed on the New York Times list. So it was very cool to be dueling with David Brooks, and that was very fun. I think I heard about this story. This was from a couple years ago on wind power growing off the coast. It's a well-established story now, but at the time it was, a little bit earlier stage, and I heard about it from talking to Michael and others that I've talked to for this wind book that I'm working on. Another way I come up with ideas is through just reading other newspapers. I have a system of Google alerts. That's my particular methodology. I have like 40 Google alerts, some crazy number set up for Texas and water, Texas and coal, Texas and X, and they bring me in sort of local news stories, and that's how I learned, for example, about the water crisis in Midland, Texas, which is very, very, very dry. One other technique I use is just thinking up questions myself. So we talk in the state all about smart electric meters. What about smart water meters? Do they exist? So we did this story. I haven't quite gotten around to smart gas meters, but maybe one day. In closing, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what I see as the big issues of 2013. You all are going to be focused a lot on, a couple of things, I'm sure. The production tax credit, will that be renewed? I'm sure you're going to be talking about how to maybe re-energize interest in renewable energy in this state capital and others. I've certainly noticed that the trend has been that renewable energy subsidies are less welcome than they were 10 years ago when wind really started taking off here. And for me, the top issue I'm going to be looking at is water. This is a data report we put together. It uses Texas Water Development Board data. You can see at just a glance how serious the problem is here in Texas. It's just, this is reservoir levels in the state. This is an auto-updating application. I took this screenshot yesterday or the day before, and the red is like 25% full or less, and the green is 75% full. And so you can just see in an instant that West Texas is a lot drier than East Texas. And so that's really going to be probably my #1 issue. I mean, here in Austin, as you all may know, we got no rain in November. I mean, no rain, zilch, none. And that's just very, very bad. And there's lots of folks talking about water, lieutenant governor, speaker. We'll see what they actually do. I'll certainly be looking at wind, the production tax credit. What effect does that have on Texas, whatever happens. I'll be particularly curious if it's not renewed, is the building of wind farms actually going to stop, like some in the industry have really been emphasizing, or will some wind farms continue to be built, and why? Fracking certainly is always a hot topic, both on the regulatory side, what new regulations might be coming into play on air emissions, sort of well integrity, how the well is constructed, and so on, and also on the supply side in terms of how natural gas, how shale gas is reshaping our grid. I'm sure you all are very, very familiar with that. And certainly, last topic is, of course, ERCOT and what happens there. And obviously, all of those topics fit together in many ways. If we don't get water next year, if we don't get rain, how's our grid going to be looking next summer if it's really hot? And so those are all questions that I and many others will be looking at. So that's really it. Thank you so much.